Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
Punishment turned rebirth. It all started with a phone call. I didn't hear it. Of course, I was upstairs in my room, music blasting through my headphones, scrolling through pictures from the pep rally. I paused on one of Madison Peters, laughing with her friends. My lip curled into a sneer. I remembered the way I'd cornered her by the lockers earlier, the way her smile had vanished when I made that crude comment about her skirt. The memory gave me a stupid, hollow surge of power. At 17, I thought that was what being a man was all about: power. Control. Making sure everyone knew you were at the top of the food chain. I was an idiot, a handsome idiot, people said, which only made it worse. It gave me a free pass for behavior that was, in hindsight, monstrous. I didn't know my world was about to be dismantled until my door opened without a knock. My mother, Sarah, stood in the doorway. She wasn't yelling. That's how I knew it was serious. Mum was a yeller when I left my wet towel on the floor or forgot to take out the trash. When she was quiet, it was the calm before a hurricane. She just stood there, her arms crossed, her face a mask of disappointment so profound it felt like a physical blow. She held her phone in one hand, its screen dark. The principal called. She said, her voice dangerously low. "About you and Madison Peters." I ripped my headphones off, my heart starting to pound a nervous rhythm against my ribs. It was just a joke. She's too sensitive. A joke. Mum stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind her. The soft click echoed in the sudden silence. He said she was in the guidance counselor's office, crying. He said this wasn't the first time you'd targeted her, or other girls. He used the word harassment. Josh. I scoffed. A defensive, ugly sound. Harassment. I was just messing around. It's what guys do. That was the line that broke her. I saw something shift in her eyes. A flicker of resolve that terrified me. She walked over to my bed and sat on the edge, her gaze never leaving my face. "No, Josh," she said, her voice now laced with a cold, hard steel I had never heard before. "That is not what decent men do. That is what bullies do. That is what cowards do." She stood up and began pacing, a slow, deliberate rhythm like a judge contemplating a sentence. I stayed silent, the bravado draining out of me, replaced by a growing dread. "I've tried everything," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "I've grounded you. I've taken your phone, your car keys. I've talked to you until I'm blue in the face about respect, about empathy. But you don't listen. You don't understand. You see girls as objects, targets. You don't see their humanity." She stopped pacing and turned to face me, her eyes locking onto mine. And then she delivered the sentence. "From now on, you will live as a girl until you understand what it's like to be looked at with the same eyes you used on them." The words hung in the air, so absurd, so completely insane, that for a second, I thought I'd misheard. Then, I burst out laughing. It was a strained, nervous laugh, but it was the only defense I had. "You're kidding." "Right?" I asked, a grin plastered on my face. "This is some kind of weird, new age parenting thing. You're going to make me wear a dress for an hour. Fine. Whatever." My mother's expression didn't change. "Don't think this is a joke," she said. She walked over to my closet and pulled out a large, sealed cardboard box I had never seen before. She placed it on my bed with a heavy thud. "This isn't for an hour. Josh, this is your new life. Until I decide you've learned your lesson. Until you've truly felt what it means to be vulnerable in a world that is not always kind to women." My laughter died in my throat. My blood ran cold. She wasn't kidding. This wasn't a bluff. I watched, horrified, as she broke the seal on the box and began pulling things out, laying them on my duvet like a priest preparing a ritual sacrifice. First came a simple floral sundress, the kind I'd seen girls wear a million times without a second thought. The fabric looked terrifyingly thin. Then, a set of pale pink lace underwear, a delicate bralette and matching panties. My stomach churned. White ankle socks with a frilly trim, a pair of simple, flat, black Mary Jane shoes, and finally, a small makeup bag. She laid it all out in a neat row, an entire identity, spread across my bed. "I will not have a son who grows into a man who tears women down," she stated, her voice unwavering. "If you cannot learn to respect them, then you will become one. You will learn what it feels like to have your body judged, your clothes scrutinized, your presence evaluated. You will learn." She looked at the collection of items, then back at me. "From this moment on, your name is Julie." Julie! The name felt like a slap. It was so simple, so feminine, so utterly alien. "No!" I whispered, shaking my head. "No! You can't do this. I won't do this." "You will," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Or you can find somewhere else to live. The choice is yours, but as long as you are under my roof, you will live by my rules, and this is the new rule." I looked from her resolute face to the clothes on the bed, the flimsy dress, the humiliating underwear. My bravado was gone, replaced by a primal wave of shame and fury. This was a nightmare, a surreal, waking nightmare orchestrated by my own mother. "Get changed," she ordered, her voice softening just a fraction, a hint of pity in her eyes that only made me feel worse. "I'll be back in 10 minutes to help you with your makeup. Don't make this harder than it has to be." "Julie!" She turned and left, closing the door softly behind her. I was alone with my sentence. For a long time. I just stood there, staring at the floral dress. The pattern seemed to mock me, my heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. But the clothes were real. The hard look in my mother's eyes had been real. My mind raced, searching for an escape. I could run away. I could refuse. But I knew my mom. I knew that look. There was no way out. The humiliation was the point. She wanted to break me down completely. With trembling hands, I reached for the hem of my t-shirt. My fingers felt clumsy, disconnected from my brain. I pulled it off, then my jeans, until I was standing in my boxers, feeling exposed and strangely cold. The air in my room, usually a comfortable temperature, suddenly felt sharp against my skin. My gaze fell on the lace panties. They were a delicate, almost translucent pink. The thought of putting them on made me feel physically ill. It was a line I never thought I would cross. It was an intimate garment, a symbol of everything I wasn't. But my mother's threat echoed in my head. My hands shook as I picked them up. The lace was impossibly soft, cool and light against my fingertips. I took a deep, shuddering breath and stepped into them, pulling them up my legs. The sensation was immediate and jarring. My skin, accustomed only to the soft cotton of boxers, recoiled from the alien texture. The fabric clung to me in ways that felt both invasive and deeply, profoundly wrong. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. Next was the bra. It wasn't padded, just two simple triangles of the same pink lace connected by thin, stretchy straps. I fumbled with the clasp at the back, my fingers unable to work the tiny hooks and eyes. It was designed to be operated by someone with more experience, more grace. Frustration and shame warred within me. After several clumsy attempts, I finally managed to connect the clasp. The straps dug into my shoulders, and the band felt tight and constricting around my chest. It was a constant, physical reminder of the role I was being forced to play. Then, the dress. I held it up. It was made of a light cotton material, with a simple A-line cut that fell just above the knees. I pulled it over my head. The fabric swished around me, cool and airy against my skin. It felt flimsy, unprotective. Standing in my room, in my own home, I felt utterly defenseless. My muscular arms and broad shoulders, things I had always taken pride in, now seemed grotesque and out of place, stretching the delicate fabric of the dress. I looked at my legs. I was a guy. My legs had hair on them. The sight of it peeking out from under the hem of the floral dress was so bizarre, so jarring, that I almost ripped the thing off. But my mother's words stopped me. This was part of the lesson. Finally, the socks and shoes. The frilly ankle socks felt childish and ridiculous. The Mary Janes were snug. I took a tentative step. The hard sole felt strange after years of sneakers. My whole body felt wrong, like I was a puppet being controlled by a cruel master. I didn't dare look in the mirror. Not yet. I couldn't face the person who would be staring back at me. I just stood in the middle of my room, drowning in the rustle of cotton and the unfamiliar tightness around my chest, waiting for the next stage of my punishment to begin. The 10 minutes felt like an eternity. When the door finally opened again, I flinched, wrapping my arms around myself as if that could somehow hide the humiliating reality of what I had become. My mum stepped in, holding the makeup bag. Her expression was unreadable. She didn't look triumphant, nor did she look entirely sorry. She looked like a surgeon about to perform a difficult but necessary operation. "Sit down at your desk," she said quietly. "Let's get this over with." I obeyed, my movements stiff and robotic. I sat in my gaming chair, the floral dress bunching up awkwardly around my thighs. I felt like a prisoner on death row. My reflection was visible in the dark screen of my computer monitor, a distorted, shadowy figure in a dress. I quickly looked away, my stomach twisting into a tight, painful knot. The humiliation was just beginning. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the Josh I had been just an hour ago was already gone. In his place was someone else, someone named Julie. My mother pulled my desk chair out and motioned for me to sit. I did, my body rigid with resistance. The smooth, cool wood of the chair felt strange against the backs of my bare thighs, a sensation I'd never noticed before. I instinctively tried to pull the hem of the dress down, a futile gesture of modesty that felt both absurd and necessary. Sarah opened the makeup bag, and the contents seemed to spill out like surgical instruments. Tubes, compacts, brushes, and pencils I couldn't identify. The air filled with a faint, powdery, floral scent. It was her scent, the one that usually meant comfort and home. Now it smelled like prison. "The first lesson," she said, her voice businesslike, "is about the face you present to the world. For girls, that's often not the one they were born with. It's a construction. It takes time, effort, and skill." She started with a bottle of foundation. The liquid was cool as she dotted it on my forehead, cheeks, and chin. My immediate instinct was to recoil, to wipe the cold, wet stuff off my skin. But I forced myself to stay still. Her fingers were surprisingly gentle as she blended it in, erasing the minor blemishes and the faint stubble shadow on my jaw that I was so proud of. As she worked, she erased me. The face in the mirror was slowly becoming a smoother, softer, more anonymous canvas. "Close your eyes," she commanded. I obeyed. I felt the soft tickle of a brush dusting powder across my face, setting the foundation. Then came the faint, waxy pressure of an eyebrow pencil, shaping my thicker brows into a more defined, arched shape. It was a tiny change, but it felt significant. She was resculpting me, feature by feature. The strangest sensation was the eyeliner. She tilted my chin up and, with a steady hand, drew a thin black line along my upper lash line. I could feel the delicate tip of the pencil tracing a path just millimeters from my eyeball. My eye watered involuntarily. "Stop squirming," she chided gently. "You'll get used to it. Most girls have to do this every single day. One little slip and you have to start all over." She applied a light coat of mascara, the tiny brush grabbing each of my lashes and coating them in black. When she told me to open my eyes, I blinked, and my lashes felt heavy, foreign. They brushed against the skin under my eyebrows. Finally, the lipstick. She chose a soft, rosy pink. The tube twisted with a soft click. The waxy, smooth stick glided across my lips. First the bottom, then the top. The sensation was slick and strange. The taste was faintly chemical and sweet. "There," she said, stepping back to observe her work. "Now, you can look." My heart was hammering against the cage of my ribs. I felt the constricting band of the bralette, the cool air on my legs, the heavy weight of mascara on my lashes, and the slick, artificial coating on my lips. I didn't want to look. I was terrified of what I would see, but her command was implicit. Slowly, reluctantly, I lifted my head and met my own gaze in the mirror above my dresser, and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't me. The person staring back had my eyes. Yes, but they were different now, larger, darker, framed by the liner and long lashes. The face was softer, the angles of my jaw less pronounced under the foundation. The eyebrows were neater, more elegant, and the lips, they were pink and full, looking unnervingly like a girl's lips. The floral dress, the shaped brows, the painted mouth, it all came together to create an illusion that was terrifyingly effective. I saw a stranger, a confused, scared, pretty girl. Is that me?" I whispered, the words feeling foreign coming from those pink lips. "That's Julie," my mother corrected softly. "And yes, that's you. This is how the world will see you now." A wave of nausea and disorientation washed over me. I wasn't just wearing a costume. I was inhabiting a different person. The reflection wasn't a joke. It was a statement. My male identity, the one I had built my entire life around, felt like it was dissolving right before my eyes. A part of me screamed in protest, a frantic, primal rage against this violation. But another, much smaller, much quieter part of me was simply stunned. The girl in the mirror was strangely compelling. I couldn't look away. "Now for the next part of your lesson," my mother said. Breaking the spell, she picked up a hairbrush. "Your hair is a bit short, but we'll make it work." She brushed my hair, which was in that awkward longer phase I'd been cultivating, parting it on the side and trying to soften the look around my face. She clipped a small silver barrette just above my ear. It was the final, devastating touch. "All right, Julie, stand up. Let me see you walk." Walk. I felt like I could barely stand. I rose on shaky legs. The Mary Janes felt awkward, forcing me into a different posture. "Don't stomp," she instructed. "You're not marching into battle. Think lighter, softer steps, one foot in front of the other." I took a few clumsy steps across my room. The dress swished around my knees, a constant, rustling reminder. Every movement felt exaggerated and unnatural. "Better," she conceded. "It will take practice." She glanced at the clock. "Okay, it's time." Time for what I asked. My voice a panicked croak. "Your first walk, 15 minutes, around the block." I want you to go out there and feel it. Feel what? The looks. She said simply, the way people's eyes slide over you and make a judgment in a split second, the way a car slows down, the way a group of men on a porch stop talking when you walk by. I want you to feel what it's like to be a girl, alone, walking down the street. It's an education you can't get from any book. The idea sent a bolt of pure terror through me. Outside. Like this. Where my neighbors, my friends, anyone could see me. No! I pleaded, the last vestiges of my defiance crumbling into desperation. Please! Mom, not outside. I'll do anything. I'll apologize to Madison. I'll clean the whole house. Please! An apology now would be meaningless, she said, her expression hardening again. It would be words you said to get out of a punishment. You need to understand why you're apologizing. You need to feel it. Go. 15 minutes. I'll be watching from the window. There was no appeal. She was immovable. She opened my bedroom door and gestured down the hall. Defeated. I walked past her, my head down, my whole body burning with shame. I felt her eyes on my back as I walked down the stairs. Each step was a fresh wave of humiliation. The feel of the dress, the clack of the flat shoes on the hardwood floor, the sight of my own pink-lipped reflection in the darkened window by the door, it was a symphony of degradation. I reached the front door and paused, my hand hovering over the knob. This was the point of no return. Once I stepped outside, I was no longer Josh in a costume. I was Julie, a girl, subject to the world's gaze. Taking a shuddering breath, I opened the door and stepped out into the cool evening air. The world immediately felt different. The gentle breeze, which would have been refreshing just an hour ago, now felt invasive. It slipped under the hem of my dress, chilling my bare legs and making me feel shockingly exposed. I wrapped my arms around myself, hunching my shoulders as I started down the driveway. The familiar street looked alien, menacing. Every lighted window was a pair of eyes. Every passing car was a potential threat. My senses were on high alert. I heard the laughter of a group of teenagers a few houses down and I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. I wanted to run, to hide. But my mother's invisible gaze from the window kept me moving forward. I kept my head down, my eyes fixed on the pavement, focusing on taking the small, quiet steps she'd instructed. But I could still feel it. A car did slow down as it passed, and I could feel the driver's curiosity. An old man watering his lawn looked up, his gaze lingering just a second too long. It wasn't aggressive, not even unfriendly. But it was a look I'd never experienced before. It was an appraisal. I wasn't just a person passing by. I was a girl, an object to be observed and categorized. This was the feeling she was talking about, this constant, low-level hum of being watched, of being evaluated. It was exhausting. It was terrifying. With every step, I felt my old confidence, my arrogance, my sense of ownership over the world being stripped away. I was just a girl in a floral dress, walking alone as dusk settled, and I had never felt so small or so vulnerable in my entire life. I turned the corner, out of sight of my house, and leaned against a tree, gasping for breath as if I'd been running a marathon. The rough bark scraped against my back. I looked down at myself, the dress, the frilly socks, the delicate shoes. This wasn't a costume anymore. It was a uniform, and it had changed the world. Or at least, how I was allowed to exist in it. I finally looked back at my reflection in a car's dark window. The girl staring back looked terrified. Her pink lips were parted, her eyes wide with fear. For the first time, looking at her, I didn't feel rage or disgust. I felt a pang of pity. She looked so lost. And then the thought hit me. A shocking, unwelcome realization that settled deep in my gut. Why? Doesn't this feel as bad as I thought it would, amidst the terror and shame? There was something else, something quiet and strange, the reflection in the window. This Julie, she wasn't entirely ugly. The thought was so disloyal to my old self that I pushed it away instantly. But it lingered at the edge of my consciousness, a terrifying and confusing whisper. My 15 minutes were almost up. It was time to go home. The first week was hell. There's no other way to describe it. Every evening, the moment I got home from school, the transformation began. It became a grim, non-negotiable ritual. I'd drop my backpack, and the floral dress would be waiting on my bed. Or maybe a simple skirt and blouse my mum had bought. My existence was split into two. By day, I was Josh, walking the halls of my high school with a new, hollowed-out feeling in my chest, flinching every time I saw Madison Peters. I avoided my friends, gave one-word answers, and counted the minutes until the final bell. Then, I'd come home and cease to be. The first few nights, I fought it. I argued. I pleaded. I tried locking my door. But my mum simply produced a key. My resistance was met with a calm, unyielding wall of silence. Her only response was to add time to my sentence. My 15-minute walks became 20, then 30. I learned quickly that fighting only made it worse. So I submitted. Every evening, I would strip off my identity as Josh, piece by piece. The jeans, the t-shirt, the sneakers, they all went into the hamper. Then, I would put on Julie. The process became mechanical, but the sensations never truly went away. My mother insisted on one crucial addition after the first night shaving. "No girl walks around like that," she'd said, handing me a pink razor and a can of shaving cream. This is part of the effort I was talking about. So, my nightly ritual began in the shower. The first time I guided the razor over my calf, it felt like another act of self-betrayal. I watched as the hair, a sign of my own masculinity, washed away down the drain. But the result was undeniably different. My legs were smooth, unnaturally so. When I put on a skirt after that, the feeling of the fabric gliding against my bare, smooth skin was a constant, distracting whisper. A breeze felt entirely new. The brush of a sheet in bed at night was startling. It was a heightened state of sensory awareness I had never known. After showering and shaving, I would sit at my desk, which now had a permanent, lighted mirror propped against the wall. I learned to do my own makeup. My mum coached me for the first few days, her hand guiding mine. "Light a touch with the foundation," she'd say. "Blend it into the neckline. You don't want a mask, or steady your hand for the eyeliner. Rest your pinky on your cheek." Soon, I was on my own. I got better at it. My clumsy, thick fingers learning to manipulate the delicate brushes and pencils with a surprising dexterity. I learned the difference between concealer and foundation. I learned how to apply blush so it looked like a natural flush and not clown paint. I'd watch my face transform in the mirror each night, the sharp lines of Josh softening into the more delicate features of Julie. The process was meditative in a disturbing way. For that half hour, I was neither Josh nor Julie. I was just an artist, creating a different person on the canvas of my own skin. Then came the clothes. My mum had bought more. A few simple cotton skirts in pastel colors, a pair of soft, stretchy jeans that were unmistakably feminine in their cut, several blouses, and more dresses. And with them came the underpinning of this new identity: more bras, more panties. They were no longer just pink lace. There were simple cotton ones for comfort, a soft blue one, a plain white one. They became a non-negotiable part of the uniform. Putting one on every evening was the final click of the lock. sealing me into the persona of Julie. I hated the feeling of the straps on my shoulders and the band around my chest, but I also grew accustomed to it. It was part of the uniform. After I was dressed, my hair clipped back, my lips colored, I would spend the rest of the evening as Julie. I ate dinner with my mum, not as her son, but as this strange new daughter she was sculpting. She'd correct my posture if I slouched or put my elbows on the table. "Julie, sit up straight, it's more elegant." She'd even critique my speech. "Don't mumble, speak clearly, and stop being so sullen." I was being groomed, disciplined into a completely different mode of existence. The most agonizing part of the evening was still the walk. Every night, rain or shine, I had to go outside as Julie. I learned to dread the sound of a passing car, the casual glances of strangers. I learned that what you wear dictates how people see you. In a simple skirt and blouse, I got fewer looks than in a shorter sundress. I learned that walking with my head held high, even if it was a bluff, invited less scrutiny than hunching over in shame. These were lessons in survival. But as the days turned into a week, and then 2, something unexpected began to happen. The sharp, constant agony of humiliation began to dull, replaced by a strange and confusing sense of routine, normalcy. Even, I started to notice things I hadn't before. I discovered that I actually liked the scent of the cherry blossom body wash my mum had bought for me. I found that some of the clothes were surprisingly comfortable. A soft, flowing skirt was far less restrictive than my usual baggy jeans. One evening, my mum laid out 2 options for me on the bed, a simple navy blue dress and a pale yellow skirt with a white blouse. "Your choice tonight, Julie," she said, and then left the room. I stood there for a long time, just looking at them. It was the first piece of agency I'd been given in this whole ordeal. It felt monumental. I found myself evaluating them not on the basis of which was less humiliating, but on some other, alien criteria. The blue was more subdued, safer. The yellow was brighter, more noticeable, but also prettier. Without really thinking about it, I reached for the yellow skirt. As I put it on, along with the soft, white blouse, a bizarre thought fluttered through my mind. "This looks nice." I quickly suppressed it, horrified at myself, but when I looked in the mirror, I couldn't deny it. The yellow brought out a warmth in my skin tone I hadn't known was there. The outfit, combined with the makeup I was now quite skilled at applying, created a version of Julie that looked less like a boy being punished and more like a genuine, pretty girl. That night, on my walk, something felt different. I didn't hunch my shoulders as much. I kept my head up a little higher. The skirt swished around my smooth legs with a pleasant, rhythmic grace. A woman walking her dog smiled at me. A simple, friendly gesture from one woman to another. "Good evening," she said. "Good evening," I replied, and the voice that came out was softer, higher pitched than my usual gruff tone. It was Julie's voice, and it felt natural. When I got home that night, I didn't immediately scrub the makeup off my face as I usually did. I stood in front of my mirror for a long time, just looking. I turned my head from side to side, watching how the light caught the faint shimmer in the eyeshadow I'd used. I tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture I'd seen girls do 1,000 times, but had never performed myself. My hand, with its clean-clipped nails, looked surprisingly delicate against my cheek. The anger was still there, simmering deep beneath the surface. The resentment at my mother for doing this to me was a constant companion, but it was no longer the only feeling. It was now joined by a profound, terrifying confusion. I wasn't just playing a part anymore. The lines were starting to blur. When I wore Julie's clothes, I walked differently. I talked differently. I even thought differently. I thought about things like whether my nail polish was chipped or if my eyeliner was smudged. These were thoughts Josh would have laughed at. The person in the mirror was no longer a complete stranger. I was starting to recognize her, and the most terrifying part of all was that, in quiet, unguarded moments like this, I was starting to realize that I didn't entirely hate her. Julie wasn't just a punishment anymore. She was becoming a part of me, and I had no idea what that meant for the boy I was supposed to be. The third week marked a shift. The routine was so embedded now that the transition from Josh to Julie became faster, more practiced. The shock had completely worn off. Leaving behind a complicated landscape of emotions I was struggling to navigate, Josh was a ghost I inhabited during school hours, a hollowed-out shell going through the motions. Julie, however, was becoming more real, more vivid, every single day. The mirror was now my confidant and my enemy. It showed me a truth I wasn't ready to accept. I'd catch myself looking at my reflection, not with horror, but with a critical, almost appraising eye. Does this color wash me out? Should I try a different hairstyle? These were Julie's thoughts, and they were taking up more and more space in my head. One afternoon, I came home from school feeling particularly drained. A couple of my old friends had tried to joke with me by the lockers, and I couldn't even summon the energy to play along. My responses were flat, my usual swagger gone. They exchanged confused looks and left me alone. I felt a pang of loss, but it was distant, like remembering a character from a book I'd read long ago. In my room, a new outfit was laid out. It was a simple, sleeveless blouse in a soft lavender color and a pair of white, capri-length pants that were tailored and distinctly feminine. Beside them was a pair of simple, elegant sandals. My mum was slowly escalating the wardrobe, moving from girlish dresses to more stylish, contemporary women's clothing. I went through my ritual: the shower, the shave, the slow, careful application of makeup. As I put on the lavender blouse, the soft, silky material felt cool against my smooth skin. It was sleeveless, and for the first time, I was showing my arms. I had worked hard for the muscles in my arms, but now, without the context of a t-shirt, they looked different, softer, more slender. I stepped into the white capri and zipped them up. They fit perfectly, hugging my hips in a way my old jeans never did. I slipped my feet into the sandals. They had a tiny 1-inch heel that forced me to stand up straighter, shifting my center of balance. When I looked in the mirror this time, it was a genuine shock. The girl staring back wasn't just a boy in a dress anymore. She was chic. The outfit was something a stylish young woman would wear on a summer afternoon. My hair had grown a little longer, and the way I'd clipped it back looked intentional, feminine. The light makeup defined my features without being obvious. For the first time, the illusion was seamless. I couldn't see Josh anywhere. A strange, dizzying feeling washed over me. It was a mix of panic and something else, something that felt dangerously like pleasure. I walked out of my room, my steps tentative on the small heels. My mum was in the kitchen. She looked up as I entered, and her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She didn't say anything for a moment, just took in the sight of me. "That's a good look for you." "Julie," she said finally, her voice neutral, but I detected a hint of surprise. The casual use of the name, the compliment it sent a jolt through me. She wasn't talking to a punishment project anymore. She was talking to the girl standing in front of her. That evening, I didn't take my usual walk around the block. My mother had a different task for me. "We're out of milk," she said, handing me her purse. "There's $20 in there. Go down to the corner store." The corner store, a public place. A place with bright fluorescent lights and other people who might know me. I can't," I stammered, my blood running cold. "Yes, you can," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "You've been walking around the neighborhood for weeks. This is just the next step. You go in, you get the milk, you pay, and you leave. No one will even notice you. You're just a girl running an errand for her mom." Just a girl. The phrase echoed in my head. Was that all I was now? The short walk to the store felt like miles. The tiny heel on my sandals made a soft, distinct click-clack on the pavement, a sound that screamed, "Look at me!" I clutched the purse strap so tightly my knuckles were white. The purse itself was a strange appendage, a constant reminder of my role. The automatic doors of the store slid open with a chime, and I stepped inside, immediately hit by the cold air conditioning and the bright, unforgiving lights. I kept my head down, making a beeline for the dairy coolers at the back. My heart was pounding. I felt a dozen pairs of eyes on me, even though I knew it was probably just my paranoia. I grabbed the gallon of milk, the plastic container cold and heavy in my arms. As I turned, my worst fear was realized. A couple of guys from my grade, seniors I vaguely knew from the football team, were standing in the snack aisle. They hadn't seen me yet. Panic seized me. My first instinct was to drop the milk and run. But where would I run? I was trapped. I forced myself to breathe. My mum's words came back to me. Just a girl running an errand. I wasn't Josh. They wouldn't recognize Josh. They were looking for a boy, not the girl standing here in lavender and white. I took a deep breath, held my head high like she'd taught me, and walked toward the checkout counter. It was the longest walk of my life. I could feel their eyes on me as I passed their aisle. I heard one of them whistle softly. "Hey, check her out," one of them said to the other, his voice a low rumble. I felt a hot flush of shame and anger. It was exactly the kind of thing I would have said just a month ago. And now, I was on the receiving end. I felt disgusting. I felt objectified. I felt like Madison Peters. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This was it. This was the entire point of the lesson. This feeling of being reduced to nothing more than your appearance, of being a target for casual, unthinking judgment. I reached the counter, my hands shaking as I placed the milk down. I fumbled in the purse for the $20 bill, my cheeks burning. I paid the cashier, took my change, and walked out of the store without looking back. I didn't start running until I was halfway home. I ran, the milk jug banging against my leg, the sandals clacking frantically on the pavement. I burst through the front door, slammed it behind me, and leaned against it, panting. My mum came out of the living room, a concerned look on her face. What happened? I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. It wasn't just tears of shame or fear. It was tears of understanding. For the first time, I truly, deeply got it. Later that night, long after my mum had gone to bed, I was still in Julie's clothes. I hadn't taken them off. I couldn't bring myself to. Taking them off felt like a lie. I went into my closet and, on an impulse, pulled out a pair of my old jeans and a favorite hoodie. The clothes I had lived in just a month ago. I held them up. They felt alien. The denim was rough, the hoodie bulky and shapeless. I slipped off the white capri and tried to pull on the jeans. They felt wrong. The rough fabric was abrasive against my smooth legs. The fit was baggy and strange. I pulled the hoodie over my head, and it swallowed me in shapeless, drab grey fabric. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in my life, I was truly horrified by the reflection of Josh. He looked like a stranger, a slob, a boy hiding inside a mess of fabric. His face, without the subtle definition of makeup, looked pale and indistinct. This person in the mirror was the bully. He was the one who hurt people. My hands trembling, I tore the hoodie and jeans off. Throwing them into a corner of my room, I quickly put the lavender blouse and white capris back on. I looked in the mirror again, and Julie stared back at me. Her eyes were wide and tear-streaked, but she was there, and in that moment, I realized the terrifying, earth-shattering truth. The costume wasn't the lie. Josh was. Being Josh felt like wearing a costume. Being Julie, with all its fear and vulnerability and complicated feelings, felt real. It felt like me. The mirror's truth was undeniable. Julie wasn't just a part of me anymore. She was winning. The incident at the corner store was a turning point. The raw, visceral experience of being on the other side of that casual, objectifying male gaze changed everything. It was no longer a theoretical lesson my mother was teaching me. It was a reality I had now lived. The anger I felt towards those boys in the store was real, but it was quickly overshadowed by the crushing weight of guilt for my own past behavior. Every catcall I'd ever made, every snide comment, every time I'd made a girl feel small and exposed, it all came rushing back. But now I felt it from their perspective. I spent the next 2 days in a daze. My transformation into Julie each evening was no longer a punishment. It had become a strange kind of penance. I felt that I deserved to feel this vulnerability. I owed it to every girl I had ever wronged. On the 3rd night after the store incident, my mother came into my room as I was finishing my makeup. I was wearing a simple pale blue sundress. I had become meticulous with my appearance as Julie, taking a quiet pride in making her look as real and as lovely as possible. "I think it's time," my mother said softly. I met her eyes in the mirror. Time for what? To apologize to Madison. She said, "But not as Josh. A letter from Josh now would just be a coward's excuse. I want you to apologize as the person who now understands." She wanted Julie to apologize. The idea was terrifying. It meant revealing this secret, this bizarre punishment, to the very person who had been the catalyst for it all. But I also knew she was right. An apology from Josh would be hollow. An apology from Julie, that would be real. "I want you to write her a letter." My mum continued, "Tell her everything. Tell her what I've done. And tell her what you've learned. And ask to meet her, face to face." My hand, holding a tube of lip gloss, trembled. "Meet her." "Like this," I whispered, gesturing to my dress. "My face." "Yes," my mother said, her gaze firm. "Exactly like this." It took me 2 hours to write that letter. I sat at my desk, in my blue dress, and poured everything out onto the paper. I didn't make excuses for Josh's behavior. I called it what it was: cruel, arrogant, and insecure. Then, I tried to explain Julie. I wrote about the humiliation, the fear, the shock of seeing myself in the mirror for the first time. I wrote about shaving my legs and the strange feeling of a breeze on my skin. I wrote about the walk to the corner store and hearing that whistle. I wrote about how, for the first time in my life, I understood how it felt to be a target. "I'm not asking you to forgive Josh," I finished. "He doesn't deserve it. I'm writing to you as Julie, because she's the one who finally understands how much he hurt you. If you're willing, I'd like to say this to you in person." My mum read the letter and simply nodded, a flicker of something pride relief in her eyes. The next day, she gave it to the school counselor to pass on to Madison. The wait for a reply was agonizing. For 2 days, every time the phone rang, my stomach twisted into a knot. I went through the motions of my life: Josh at school, Julie at home with a sense of impending doom. What if she laughed at me? What if she showed the letter to everyone? The thought of my secret being exposed was mortifying. The call came on a Thursday evening. I was already Julie, wearing the lavender blouse and white capris from the other night. It had become my favorite outfit, the one I felt most myself in. My mom answered the phone in the kitchen, and after a moment of quiet talking, she came to the door of my room. "It's Madison. She said she wants to talk to you." My blood turned to ice. My mom held out the cordless phone. I took it with a shaking hand. "Hello," I managed, my voice coming out as a reedy whisper. It was Julie's voice. "Hi, Josh or—" Julie Madison's voice was hesitant, laced with a confusion I couldn't blame her for. "Julie is fine," I said, my voice barely audible. There was a pause. "I got your letter," she said. I don't even know what to say. It was the craziest, most unbelievable thing I've ever read. "But I believe you." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I'd like to meet." She said, "What you wrote. I want to hear it from you. Can we meet at the park tomorrow after school?" "Yes," I agreed immediately, my heart pounding. "Okay. And can I ask something weird?" she said. "Anything." "Will you come as Julie?" The question hung in the air. She wasn't asking to mock me. Her tone was one of genuine, gentle curiosity. She wanted to meet the person who wrote the letter. "Yes," I said, a strange sense of resolve washing over me. "I will." The next day was the longest of my life. I couldn't focus on anything in class. As soon as I got home, I began the most important transformation of my life. I showered, I shaved with meticulous care. I took extra time with my makeup, wanting to look not like a boy in a costume, but like a real, presentable girl. I put on the lavender blouse and the white capris. I slipped on the sandals. I looked in the mirror, and the terrified girl of a few weeks ago was gone. In her place was a nervous, but determined, young woman, Julie. My mum drove me to the park and dropped me off. "You can do this," she said, giving my hand a squeeze. I saw Madison sitting on a bench near the pond. She looked up as I approached. I watched her face as she took me in. There was no mockery, no disgust, just a wide-eyed, stunned curiosity. I walked the last few feet, the little clicks of my sandals the only sound between us. I stopped in front of the bench. "Hi, Madison," I said, my voice soft. She just stared for a moment. "Wow," she whispered, "it's really you." I sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving a careful space between us. "I'm so sorry," I said, the words I'd rehearsed 1,000 times suddenly feeling inadequate. "For everything. The way I treated you was inexcusable. I was a jerk, and I didn't understand. I didn't get it until—" I gestured vaguely at myself, at my clothes. "Until your mum turned you into a girl," she finished, a small, incredulous smile playing on her lips. I nodded, my cheeks flushing. "Yeah." She looked at me, really looked at me, taking in my clothes, my makeup, the way I sat with my knees pressed together. "Your letter said that when you were at the corner store, some guys whistled at you." "Yeah," I said, my voice cracking slightly, and I wanted to disappear. I felt so cheap and angry, and I realized that's probably how I made you feel every single day. A tear slid down my cheek, and I quickly wiped it away, smudging my carefully applied foundation. Madison's expression softened completely. She moved a little closer on the bench. "I think, when you were Josh, you only knew how to look at people. But now," she said, her voice gentle, "you know what it feels like to be looked at." Her words mirrored my mother's so perfectly that it sent a shiver down my spine. She understood. She reached out and lightly touched the fabric of my lavender sleeve. The contact was electric, a simple, friendly gesture that felt profoundly significant. "To be honest," she said, pulling her hand back and giving me a small, genuine smile, "Julie suits you better." Her words hit me like a tidal wave. It wasn't pity, it wasn't mockery, it was acceptance, it was validation. It was the first time anyone other than my mother had seen Julie and acknowledged her as a real person. In that moment, sitting on that park bench in the late afternoon sun, the last of my inner walls crumbled. The long-standing war between Josh and Julie was over. "I think so too," I whispered, and the confession felt like coming home. We sat and talked for over an hour. I told her more about my strange new life, and she listened with a surprising empathy. For the first time, I was having a real conversation with a girl, not as a boy trying to show off, but as an equal, as a friend. As I walked home that day, the sun setting behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. The punishment had become a strange, twisted gift. It had broken me down. Yes, but it had also cracked open a shell I never knew I was trapped in. That evening, when my mom saw my face, she must have known that something fundamental had shifted. "How did it go?" she asked. "It went well," I said, a real smile gracing Julie's lips for the first time. Later, she came to me as I was getting ready for bed. I was taking off my makeup, the last step in my nightly routine. "Josh," she started, then corrected herself. "Julie, I need to ask you something. I think you've learned what I wanted you to learn. Maybe more. If I told you that tomorrow, this was all over, that you didn't have to do this anymore, what would you say?" She was offering me an exit, the escape I had desperately prayed for in the beginning. I could go back to being Josh. I could put my jeans and hoodies back on and pretend the last month had been a strange dream. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I saw the face beneath the makeup, the face that was still mine, but different, softer, wiser. I thought about how wrong my old clothes had felt. I thought about Madison's smile. I thought about the strange sense of rightness I felt when I looked in the mirror and saw Julie. I met my mother's gaze in the reflection. I'd say no. "Thank you," I replied, my voice clear and steady. "I think I'll stay as Julie." My mother's offer to end the punishment was the final test, though I don't think she intended it as such. My refusal to go back to being Josh wasn't an act of defiance, but a quiet declaration of self. It hung in the air between us for a long moment, a simple statement that changed the entire dynamic of our lives. The exercise was over. This was now my reality, chosen and accepted. A slow smile spread across her face, one of genuine warmth and relief. "All right then, Julie," she said softly. "It looks like we have some shopping to do. You can't live in 3 outfits forever." That weekend was surreal. My mum and I went to the mall. It was the first time I had been in such a crowded public space as Julie, aside from the brief, terrifying trip to the corner store. But this time, it was different. I wasn't a boy in a dress being forced on a shame walk. I was Julie, a teenage girl, shopping with her mother and the world, for the most part, treated me as such. The experience was a revelation. We walked into a department store, and the sheer volume of women's clothing was overwhelming. It was a universe I had never paid any attention to. Racks upon racks of dresses, skirts, blouses, sweaters, tables piled high with jeans in a dozen different cuts: skinny, boot cut, boyfriend, high-rise. I had thought jeans were just jeans. My mum led me through the aisles, explaining the different fabrics and styles. I felt a strange excitement bubble up inside me. This wasn't about a costume anymore. This was about building a wardrobe. This was about defining who Julie was. "What kind of things do you like?" she asked. A simple question that left me speechless. I had never been asked that before. My old clothes were just clothes. T-shirts I got at concerts, hoodies from sports teams. They weren't about liking them. They were about belonging. Now, I had to actually consider my own taste. Hesitantly, I pointed to a soft green sweater. I ran my hand over a rack of denim skirts. I found myself drawn to softer fabrics and more muted, earthy colors. My mum watched, offering suggestions but letting me take the lead. The most difficult part was the dressing room. Standing in the small mirrored cubicle, surrounded by potential versions of myself, was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. I tried on a pair of dark wash skinny jeans. They were a world away from the stiff, ill-fitting men's jeans I had tried on in my room. These were soft, with a bit of stretch, and they molded to my body in a way that felt incredibly flattering. I paired them with a simple white t-shirt cut for a woman's body, not a man's, and looked in the mirror. I saw a normal teenage girl, not a model, not a caricature, just a girl in jeans and a t-shirt, and she looked happy. We bought the jeans, the green sweater, a few more blouses, a denim skirt, and another simple dress. My mum also insisted on buying me a proper pair of sneakers, women's sneakers, sleeker and more lightweight than my old clunky ones, and a comfortable pair of boots for the fall. But the most significant purchase of the day happened in the lingerie department. My mum spoke quietly with a sales associate, a kind-looking older woman, who then led me to a private fitting room. With professionalism and kindness, she measured me for a proper bra. The experience should have been mortifying, but it was handled with such gentle normalcy that I found myself relaxing. She explained the importance of a correct fit, the different styles, and helped me pick out a few comfortable, simple bras that actually fit my frame properly. Leaving that store with bags of new clothes, Julie's clothes felt like a definitive statement. When we got home, I cleared out my closet, all of Josh's old clothes, the baggy jeans, the graphic tees. The hoodies went into a black trash bag. I packed them away and put the bag in the attic. It felt like burying a person I used to know. Then, I hung up my new clothes. My closet was transformed. It was filled with soft fabrics, colors, and feminine silhouettes. It was Julie's closet. Living as Julie full-time at home became the new normal. I woke up, showered, and got dressed in my new clothes. I developed a simple, 5-minute makeup routine for the daytime. I learned to move around the house with a new kind of awareness. I didn't sprawl on the couch anymore. I curled up with a book. My gestures became smaller. My voice settled into a softer, more natural register. The small practical details of life had to be navigated. Things like using the bathroom were simple at home, of course, but it was a constant thought in the back of my mind when I considered the future. For now, my world was my home, the neighborhood, and the park where I sometimes met Madison. Our friendship grew. She was the only person my age who knew my entire story, and she became my anchor. We'd talk for hours, sometimes about my situation, but mostly about normal teenage things: school, teachers, music, movies. She treated me like any of her other girlfriends. She even gave me a nickname, Jules. It made me smile every time she said it. One afternoon, we were at her house, listening to music in her room. "You know," she said, pausing the music, "you're going to have to go back to school eventually. Have you thought about that?" The question landed like a stone in my stomach. School, the ultimate test. The place where Josh had built his reputation. The place filled with people who knew me as him. "I don't know how I can," I admitted, my voice small. "How can I walk into those halls everyone will stare? They'll laugh." "Some will," she said honestly. "But who cares about them? The people who matter will understand, and the ones who don't, well, they weren't your friends anyway. She looked at me, her expression serious. You can't hide forever. Jules, this is who you are now. Right? I nodded, yes. Then you have to live it. She said, all the way. Her words stayed with me for days. She was right. Hiding at home wasn't living. It was just a more comfortable prison. The thought of going to school as Julie was the most terrifying thing I could imagine. But the thought of going back as Josh was now impossible. There was no path backward. The only way was forward. I discussed it with my mum. We talked to the school. We spoke with the principal and the guidance counselor, who had taken that first, fateful phone call. They were confused, shocked, but ultimately, surprisingly supportive. The world was changing. They said they would do what they could to ensure my safety and privacy. We decided I would start the new semester. After the holiday break. As Julie. It gave me a few months to prepare myself. A few months for my hair to grow a little longer. A few months to grow more confident in who I was. The decision was made. The date was set. My old life was officially over, and a new, terrifying, and exhilarating one was about to begin. I was no longer a boy being punished. I was a girl, about to claim her life, and I would have to be stronger than I had ever been before. The weeks leading up to my return to school were a blur of preparation and anxiety. My life with my mom and my friendship with Madison became my entire world, a safe chrysalis where Julie could grow stronger. My hair, thankfully always on the shaggier side, was now long enough to be styled into a proper, albeit short, feminine cut. My mum took me to her salon, to a stylist she trusted. Walking into a salon was another one of those uniquely female experiences. The scent of shampoo and hairspray, the gentle hum of blow dryers, the chatter of women. I sat in the chair, a black cape draped over my clothes, and looked at the stranger in the mirror. The stylist, a bubbly woman named Maria, talked to me about what I wanted. Something soft, I said, my voice barely a whisper. To frame my face. She understood immediately. For an hour, she washed, cut, and styled, and with each snip of her scissors, she seemed to be chipping away the last remnants of Josh. When she was done, she spun the chair around to face the mirror. My hair was now a soft, layered bob that fell just below my ears. It had shape, movement, and steel. It was, without a doubt, a girl's haircut. I touched it, marveling at how light it felt. The change was profound. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Madison was my rock during this time. She took me shopping for school supplies, and for the first time, I found myself picking out a stylish backpack instead of my old, beaten-up one, and notebooks with floral covers. She helped me practice. We'd walk through crowded stores, and she'd encourage me to speak to cashiers, to ask for help, to get used to interacting with the world as Julie. Your voice is your biggest giveaway, she told me one day. Not unkindly, it's still a little low. You don't have to fake a high pitch. Just soften it. Speak more from the top of your chest, not from deep in your gut. We practiced. It felt silly at first, like acting exercises, but slowly. I found a vocal range that was comfortable, natural, and undeniably feminine. Despite all the preparation, the night before my first day back at school, I was a wreck. I couldn't eat. I must have changed my outfit a dozen times. I finally settled on the first one. I had picked my favorite dark wash skinny jeans, the comfortable boots, the soft green sweater, and a simple silver necklace my mum had given me. It was a simple, unassuming outfit. I didn't want to draw any extra attention. I laid in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. my heart racing. This was it. There would be no more hiding. Tomorrow. The whole world would see me. Tomorrow. Josh Miller would officially die. And Julie Miller would be born. I barely slept. When my alarm went off, I felt sick to my stomach, but I got up. I went through my morning routine, my hands shaking as I applied a light, natural makeup. When I was ready, I looked in the mirror. The girl staring back was pale and her eyes were wide with fear. But she was ready. She was as ready as she'd ever be. My mum drove me to school. She didn't say much. But when she pulled up to the curb, she reached over and took my hand. "I am so proud of you," she said, her eyes shining with tears. "No matter what happens in there, you remember that." I gave her a watery smile, squeezed her hand, and got out of the car. The walk from the car to the front doors of Northwood High was the longest, most terrifying walk of my life. It made my first walk around the block seem like a cakewalk. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. I heard the whispers start, the pointing. I saw people's jaws literally drop. Friends I had known my whole life stared at me. Their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and disgust. I kept my head held high, just as my mom had taught me. I focused on Madison, who was waiting for me by the entrance, a brave, loyal smile on her face. "You came," she said, linking her arm through mine. Her touch was a lifeline. "I came," I breathed, my voice shaky. Walking through the hallways was like being an animal in a zoo. The whispers were a roar in my ears. I heard my old name. I heard ugly, hateful words. A couple of jocks from the football team, my former peers, laughed out loud, pointing at me. "Dude, is that Miller? What the hell is he wearing?" Each word was a tiny paper cut on my soul. I wanted to run, to cry, to scream, but Madison's arm in mine was a firm, steady pressure. "Don't look at them," she whispered in my ear. "They're not worth it. Just keep walking." We made it to my first period class. My teacher, Ms. Albright, had been briefed. She gave me a small, encouraging smile as I walked in. I took a seat in the back, Madison sitting protectively beside me. The entire class stared. I just opened my notebook and pretended to be busy, my face burning. The day was a blur of similar experiences: stares in the hallways, whispers in the classroom, snickers in the cafeteria, where Madison and I ate alone at a small table in the corner. It was brutal. It was draining. It was every bit as bad as I had feared. But there were also moments of unexpected grace. A girl from my English class, someone I barely knew, came up to me at my locker. "Hi, Julie," she asked timidly. I nodded. I just wanted to say, "I think you look really nice. That's a great sweater." And then she just smiled and walked away. Her simple, random act of kindness was so unexpected it almost made me cry. The principal had allowed me to use the private, single-stall nurse's office restroom, a small mercy that I was incredibly grateful for. The worst moment came at the end of the day. As I was walking out to my mum's car, a group of my old friends, led by a guy named Kevin, who had been my closest buddy, cornered me. "Josh, man, what is this?" Kevin demanded, his face a mask of angry confusion. "Is this a joke? Did you lose a bet?" "My name is Julie," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I clutched my books to my chest like a shield. "No, your name is Josh," he spat. "We've been friends since we were 10. What are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing us." "I'm not embarrassing anyone," I said, finding a strength I didn't know I possessed. "I'm just being myself for the first time." He stared at me, his eyes searching my face for any sign of the boy he used to know. He found none. He shook his head in disgust. "You're sick. Man," he said. And then he and the others turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my heart broken. That rejection, from someone I had considered a brother, hurt more than all the whispers and stares combined. I held it together until I got into my mum's car, the moment the door closed. I finally broke. The tears I had been holding back all day came in a flood. Great, racking sobs of pain and relief and grief for a life and a friendship I had just lost forever. My mum just pulled me into her arms and held me, rocking me gently as I cried. "It's okay," she whispered. "The first day is the hardest. It's okay. Julie, you did it. You survived." And she was right. I had survived. It had been one of the worst days of my life, but I had walked through the fire and come out the other side. They hadn't broken me. I had shown up as Julie, and I had survived. As I cried in my mother's arms, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I could survive the next day. Too, it was a new beginning, and it was going to be hard, but it was mine. The days turned into weeks, and the initial, intense storm of my return to school began to subside. It didn't disappear entirely, but it settled into a kind of low-grade atmospheric pressure I learned to live with. The whispers and stares continued, but they became part of the background noise of my life. I learned to ignore them. I learned who my true friends were, a small but loyal group that consisted of Madison and the kind girl from English class, whose name I learned was Maya. We formed our own little island in the crowded sea of the school cafeteria. My old friends, led by Kevin, ignored me completely. They looked through me as if I didn't exist. The pain of that rejection slowly faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. The boy they had been friends with truly was gone. They were mourning a ghost, and I had to let them. Living as Julie every day, not just at home, but out in the world, solidified my identity in a way I hadn't anticipated. There was no more switching between roles. I was just Julie. I woke up. I put on my clothes, jeans and sweaters, skirts and blouses. I did my makeup. I went to school. My life became normal. Or at least, a new version of normal. I found a surprising confidence growing within me. It wasn't the loud, arrogant swagger of Josh. It was a quieter, more resilient strength. I had faced the worst of my fears and survived. I had endured the judgment of my entire world, and I was still standing. After that, a history test or a pop quiz didn't seem so intimidating. My relationship with my mum blossomed. The strange dynamic of punisher and punished was long gone. Now, we were allies, partners in this strange journey. She became my biggest cheerleader, my confidant. We'd go shopping, get our nails done together, and talk for hours. I finally had the relationship with my mother that she probably always wished she'd had with a daughter. And I, in turn, discovered a depth to her I never appreciated as a self-absorbed teenage boy. I was no longer just her son. I was her child, and she loved me for who I was, not who she expected me to be. One evening in early spring, a few months after my return to school, I was getting ready for bed. I was standing in front of my mirror, brushing my now shoulder-length hair. The face looking back at me was so familiar, so completely me, that I could barely remember the boy who used to live here. My mum knocked softly on my open door. She was holding something in her hands. It was a simple, elegant white dress made of light, flowing cotton. "I saw this today and I thought of you," she said, her voice soft. She held it out to me. "Try it on." I took the dress from her. The fabric was incredibly soft. It felt pure, clean. I slipped it on over my head. It fell perfectly. The simple cut, flattering and graceful. It wasn't a punishment dress. It wasn't a costume. It was just a beautiful dress. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my reflection in the soft light of my bedroom. The girl in the white dress looked serene. She looked at peace. The journey had been a hurricane of shame, fear, discovery, and pain. But it had brought me here, to this quiet moment of acceptance. My mum came and stood behind me, her hands resting gently on my shoulders. We looked at our reflections together. "Do you remember that first night?" she asked quietly. "That awful floral dress. Do you still hate this? Do you still hate me for what I did?" I thought back to that night, the rage, the humiliation, the sheer terror. It felt like a lifetime ago, like a story about someone else. I met her eyes in the mirror, my own eyes clear and steady. "I don't hate it," I said, my voice filled with a quiet certainty. How could I? That floral dress, that punishment. It was the beginning of everything. You didn't force me to become someone else. You finally gave me permission to stop pretending to be someone I wasn't. I reached up and placed my hand over hers on my shoulder. "I'm not a boy you forced into a dress," I said. "I'm your daughter. You didn't lose a son. Mom, you just found me." Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling, a brilliant, beautiful smile of pure love and relief. I turned around and hugged her, burying my face in her shoulder. We held each other for a long time, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible journey we had taken together. The punishment had been a rebirth. It was a harsh, painful, and unconventional path, but it had led me home to myself. I was no longer defined by the arrogance of Josh or the fear of early Julie. I was just Julie, a girl in a white dress, standing in her bedroom, loved and accepted for who she truly was. The reflection in the mirror was no longer a stranger or an enemy. It was simply me. And for the first time in my life, I was happy to see her,